Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where once again I'm continuing the classic Doctor Who reviews, continuing through the second Doctor era, and we've reached the enemy of the world. So yes, this is of course the first of the two stories that were recovered in 2013 from Nigeria, the sort of pretty massive, exciting missing episodes getting recovered for the first time in a while, and certainly a pretty major thing to have a whole serial recovered. The five missing episodes were all found when they found the whole of the enemy of the world back in 2013 or 2012, somewhere around there, and then it was obviously released in 2013. But for me, this is the first time I've ever watched this story. I didn't watch it at the time, whereas I watched The Web of Fear before when it sort of was all a thing back in 2013. But since then, I've never really got around to watching the enemy of the world. It just didn't quite. I think it wasn't quite as famous to a degree, and so I just never really got around to it until now. But well, what a cracking story it is! So of course I was aware that obviously there's a character who is played by Patrick Troughton who's not the Doctor, so I knew there was the Doctor and Salamander, and yes, that there was a sort of guy who Patrick Troughton was playing, who was the villain, and Patrick Troughton is amazing in this story, playing both of the parts throughout the 6 episodes. It's just he so brilliantly pulls off Salamander and the evil villain, sort of evil Mexican foreign villain, kind of a little bit stereotyped, but also I think brilliantly portrayed by Patrick, and to be able to kind of play both roles throughout the story and occasionally not knowing if it's the Doctor, if it's Salamander and everything, and then the final climatic scene at the end of the story as well is just fantastic between the two of them. When I genuinely was for a few moments convinced that it was Salamander, it was the Doctor and not Salamander who went into the TARDIS for the first, sort of right at the end of the story. It was obviously a bit weird, but yeah, initially I thought, oh, is this the Doctor? I think it might be. And then obviously it turned out it was Salamander, which was just brilliant. It's worth noting that final scene, I'm pretty sure, is the only time through the whole story that we have the Doctor and Salamander in shot at the same time or in the same scene together. Probably because it was just basically impossible to do with the sort of camera techniques and everything from back at that time. And having the same actor playing both roles and having them on screen together was never really going to be very easy to do in 1968, so it doesn't surprise me, but it was nice to kind of have that final climactic scene and then pretty brutally having Salamander just thrown out of the TARDIS there at the end. It did feel like there were a few fairly kind of risky moments and quite brutal moments, seeing Giles Kent just getting shot in cold blood by Salamander multiple times. That was quite dark, so it felt, yeah, on the sort of more risky, slightly darker Doctor Who, I thought, throughout this story. I mean, episode 1, right at the start of this story, is just fantastic. The location filming is phenomenal. It feels, I know it's kind of described this way generally, but it really does feel, as it says, like that sort of action film, James Bond style opening, where you've got hovercraft, a helicopter, and they're all running around on a beach and sort of shooting at each other. There's massive shootouts and stuff, and it's just like, it really just feels like it's got some great scale to the story. It really just kind of, I think, sets it up so brilliantly to start off with that action-packed opening episode to really just establish what's going on, and then obviously kind of developing the story more. It's a lot more set-based after that, but certainly that sort of budget that they probably spent quite a lot of on episode 1 was definitely worthwhile in that regard. And then yes, it's kind of a story that it feels quite far-reaching. Obviously we explore sort of Salamander's, this sort of research centre that Salamander's kind of, it's his base, essentially. We sort of explore that quite a lot, and sort of meeting Salamander and the people who work with him. That hilarious chef in, I think, episode 2 or episode 3, who's one of the most bizarre and hilarious characters I've ever seen in a Doctor Who story, who's just like, he seems like borderline sort of suicidal and depressed about, well, the food's terrible, I know it's terrible, it's always terrible, and it was just kind of a hilarious portrayal of a character, really, this like utterly depressed chef who thinks all his work is terrible and has nothing to live for in life, and it's like, if I die, I die, whatever, it doesn't matter. I just wasn't expecting it. As I say, it was just completely bizarre in episode 3, but it was certainly quite sort of fun and quite enjoyable, and so just made for a few nice kind of funny scenes down when we were in the kitchen in the house, which was quite, yeah, so that was quite a nice little sort of random bit for episode 3, I think it was. Of course, we got to see what I didn't realise until I watched this story, that this is the first appearance of Milton Johns in Doctor Who, who when you see his face, you recognise him because he's in the Endron Invasion. He plays Castellan, I think, in Invasion of Time, and the Five Doctors, so he's quite kind of done several stories through classic Doctor Who, and so suddenly I saw his young face pop up and I was like, of course it's him, I recognise him from the Five Doctors and co, and so that was quite a nice moment, of course, playing this kind of evil villainous character of Bennick in this story, and I think he portrays it really, really well, as that he just kind of feels quite ruthlessly evil, almost kind of enjoys and laughs about being evil, and it's all just hilarious to him. It's really, really effectively portrayed during this story, I think, and he's always seems so suspicious of everything around him as well. So he's a really great character throughout the story. And then sort of midway through this story, we suddenly kind of start to understand what's going on, because suddenly Salamander goes down deep underground, and we find this underground base with a load of people working, trying to, obviously creating these earthquakes and explosions and whatever up on the surface, because they think that there's been an atomic war that they're trying to fight from down below. And it just suddenly kind of added a complete other facet to this story that I completely wasn't expecting. Like, yes, obviously there was this talk about the sort of earthquakes that were happening, and it seemed to be that Salamander was creating them somehow. But for the way that it was, that a secret underground base run by about 20 humans was a bit unexpected, and a great kind of twist just to continue and bring the story, kind of keep extending out the story, I thought, which was really effective. And so, yeah, I guess it just kind of took it even more into the realms of sci-fi, and just, it felt very Doctor Who. Just having that secret underground hidden base where people are working away in what almost looked like a kind of spaceshipy or sort of futuristic base. I think that set almost rather randomly reminded me of the Ark in Space a little bit, in terms of the sort of interior of some of the interior shots of the spaceship. In there, I don't particularly know why, but that's just kind of what it struck me with. But again, that aspect, adding that onto it, really just kind of helped make the story, I think, not drag too much. It kind of helped to explain things. It was a little bit confusing first off, why Salamander's suddenly going down this massive kind of chute down, and then kind of being revealed, it's a load of humans down here. What on earth is going on? So that I thought that was quite really effectively done, and kind of helped sort of fill out the 6-part story, and made it feel like there was never really a slow moment. And I wasn't really expecting at the end as well, Giles Kent to actually turn out to be a kind of villain, but not kind of a bad man who fell out with the other bad man, and so he's pretending to be a good man, essentially. And then they sort of all find out that actually he's the guy who orchestrated everybody being trapped down underground, so secretly. So that was quite a kind of surprise twist at the end of the story as well, which just kind of added a little bit extra to it right at the end, which was quite exciting. So yeah, it just felt action-packed with so much stuff going on. It really kind of ticked along, I thought, which is always a sign of a good classic Doctor Who story. I think maybe one of the aspects where this story is a little bit more lacking, I guess you would say, is in terms of the use of Jamie and Victoria, because they're quite involved in the first three, mainly the first 3 episodes, but then they are kind of forgotten about. Once they're captured inside the house, that's kind of it. They're kind of just left there. They have a brief scene with the Doctor in I think episode 5, or maybe the beginning of episode 6, and then that's pretty much all we see of them, or they don't really do anything else in the story. So probably there's one episode I think they're not in at all, which is probably having the old week break from Doctor Who, their sort of week-long holiday that they used to sort of try and slot in by removing a character for a week, so they could have a week's holiday when it was filming nearly all year round. So yeah, it just meant that they were slightly, I guess, underused during this story. Yeah, better used earlier on, but towards the end of the story it did feel like it was all about the Doctor and Salamander and Giles Kent, and sort of, yes, just everybody involved in that was a bit more, and about these people trapped underground as well. That became the focus more than the companions, I think, in this story. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think for this story it worked very effectively. So yes, overall this story was an action-packed thriller. I didn't know what to expect to it going in. I knew that it's sort of before it was discovered, didn't seem a very popular story, but then once it was discovered, kind of found a new lease of life, and people learned to love it again, or sort of found a lot more enjoyment from it, being able to see the visuals of it. And certainly for me, I thought it was a really strong, really enjoyable story, really full of action, full of excitement, lots of twists and turns, lots of sort of things you're not expecting to happen. Patrick Troughton is amazing, playing both the Doctor and Salamander. Salamander's quite a brilliant villain, who just is a kind of the old mad man who wants to take over the world, essentially, but using some quite sort of interesting techniques by trying to kind of cause earthquakes and whatnot to kill off people and take gradual control, killing important people on the sly and everything like that. It all just kind of creates that classic Doctor Who villain. And played by Patrick Troughton as well just makes it brilliant. So I think overall this is a fantastic story. And of course it's now set in the past, which is kind of crazy to think, because this story is set in 2018, which at the time was 50 years away, which is crazy. And now I'm only just watching this for the first time 51 years after it was first made, and now this story that seemed to be in the far future is now set in the past, which is just a bit kind of mind-blowing because the show's been going so long. Obviously it's not in reality a very accurate portrayal of 2018. We don't have European zones, Australian zones and whatever, and it doesn't really realise it very well, but you kind of just have to sort of ignore that, and ignore the fact that it doesn't really fit in with Doctor Who continuity, with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor and it all being set in 2018 and everything, that really doesn't fit. So I don't know if you guys can give me a nice little headcanon explanation for how this story fits into the canon with current Doctor Who happening in 2018. I'd love to hear what you guys can come up with, but I'm guess maybe parallel universes or something like that. But I don't really know. It's a little bit hard to sort of figure out, I think. But it obviously doesn't add anything bad to the story, and yes, as I say, overall, a brilliant story. So yes, but guys, do let me know in the comments below what you thought of this as a story as well. Did you watch it as soon as it got sort of recovered in 2013, or did the sort of being able to see the visuals, if you'd seen it, as it were, with recons and audio in the past and then got to see the actual thing, did that make a big difference to you? Did you find you enjoyed it a lot more because of that? I'd just love to hear your guys' thoughts on the enemy of the world. Other than that, guys, do remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.